Novice to Expert, stories and strategies for real estate success. Hey there, I'm Laura Ortega, and I'm thrilled that you're joining me for Novice to Expert, where we go behind the curtain of expert and novice realtors. Are you considering becoming a realtor, or are you looking to level up your real estate business? Then this podcast is for you. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing my own growth journey, and we'll learn together how to create habits that produce prosperity and bless others. Whether you're a seasoned realtor or a complete novice, don't miss out on any episode. Hit that subscribe button now to stay updated with the latest interviews, tips, and strategies from industry experts. Let's go. Episode 8, Financial Peace for Realtors with special guest, Bre Bauer. Hello and welcome to the Novice to Expert podcast, where we go behind the curtain of both novice and expert realtors. I'm Laura Ortega, your host, and today joining me, we have honored guest Bre Bauer joining us all the way from Oregon. She is with eXp Powerhouse. Welcome, Bre.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I was really honored when you asked me to be on your podcast.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate, a little bit about your real estate journey, and where you are now.
Oh man, how much time do we have? I started late in life. I started real estate as probably my third career. So back in lifetimes ago, I was in corporate HR. At 19, I was like, I want to change how people think about work and being somewhere 8 hours a day. I want to impact employee culture, and so I did the whole bachelor's, master's in HR, went right into corporate America. And then realized, maybe 12 years later that was a square peg in a round hole.
Oh no.
I am not the person that should be. It's I want people to like me. I want to be, in the mix, and
Yeah.
HR is an island for the most part, especially HR, generalist roles. It's very, kind of solo.
Yeah.
So now I'm a solo agent, go figure. But yeah, so after that, I kind of did some other things when I left corporate in 2016. And then right in 2020, I moved from LA to San Francisco to be with my now husband. And it was right during the pandemic, if you're familiar with that time.
Oh my gosh.
And my job was ending. And so I kind of just started doing some I did some grocery delivery and things like that because people in San Francisco were super sketch. So I was like, great, more money for me. I was making $6,000 a month, just working, 20 hours a week, driving
Just
around delivering
groceries? That's
groceries
pretty
and
good.
alcohol, mostly alcohol. A lot of people were buying alcohol. So, but I was kind of okay, what's next for me? What do I want to do? And instead of saying okay, this is what I've always done.
Mm-hmm.
And this is these are the skills I have. Let me just go apply for another HR job or whatever. I was like, how do I want my life to look? I can't imagine going back to a 9 to 5 in an office. I can't imagine being in corporate HR again. What are the things I love to do? How do I want to feel? What do I want my life to look like? And what careers align with that? And so I was very intentional. And I had a friend who had mentioned that she just started doing real estate. And so I was like, okay, wait, tell me more about this. Because Scott and I, my husband, were actually walking one day and I saw a real estate sign with a guy's picture on it. And I'm just like, my picture would look way better on that sign. He's like, I actually think you'd be really good at real estate. But it was probably 6 months to a year later when I finally, considered it as a real, career. So I took the leap, decided to do it. And I was in San Francisco and I didn't have a network there. And so I was really how do I do this successfully?
Right.
Without a network. And so I didn't really understand, once I got licensed, how does it work? If you have to find a brokerage, and how do you figure out which brokerage is right for you? And
Totally.
so it was a very, I talked to several people and was kind of started following different people and figuring out what my vibe was. And I, had been following Amy Gregory for a while, and we had, my husband and I had talked about eventually starting a family. And so I was like, okay, whatever I do next, I want it to be able to build that around my family. I don't want to be beholden to this career. I want something that works with the life that I want. So
Right.
Those all things kind of factored in. And I ended up joining a team of at Compass with people that I, really loved and really vibed with. And they were showing up very authentically on Instagram and,
Right.
just like really doing things differently than I had seen. Cause I'm like, I'm not the buttoned up, like professional. Right. Like, and I'm not like, like gonna be with the fancy handbags and the shit. Like, that's not me. Like, I'm like athleisure 95% of the time. And like, I just want to be able to kind of show up as who I am and be funny and goofy and not have to be like very like buttoned up. And so I need to find a team that aligns with that. And so I was very fortunate to find the team that I found, and they had a very healthy pipeline, and I was the only agent that they had brought on. And so I closed the deal within my first 30 days. Like they handed me a buyer and I just like took it and ran with it. And I mean, it's kind of like the same thing, set them up, knock them down. And so I had a pretty successful, for me, I was like, I started in June of that year and I was like, I just want to close like 6 deals, and I closed 5. So I was just like, great, perfect. Yeah. And then, it got a little challenging in the second year because we relocated back to my hometown of Sacramento.
Yes.
And I, great, because I have like family and friends there, but that's like, I just wasn't around long enough to really be able to kind of like foster those relationships and be able to get business out of it. I had a listing through my team already. And so kind of made that work, and then took some time off because I had a baby. So I, did the maternity leave thing, but then like I kind of realized, oh, this team is not really serving me anymore because I moved out of the area and like they don't really have resources up here to support me, and I'm still going to be paying them a split. And so like it was kind of a mutual breakup, we were both kind of understood like what was happening, and they knew I was moving up to Central Oregon, and so it just didn't really make sense. And I had been really wanting to be part of Powerhouse for a long time, and I just knew the time wasn't right yet. And so January of last year, I pulled the trigger, and it was like the 19th of January.
Wow.
I moved to Powerhouse, and literally 3 days later, some buyers that I had been working with the previous summer that had put me on hold came back and were like, we want to write an offer on this $4 million house.
You didn't lose clients, you gained more trust.
Right. And so, there was some kind of, because it was a lead from my previous team. So we did have to work out some of that, with me coming over to Powerhouse and being able to keep that lead. But it all worked out really well. And it was just kind of like the universe was like, you made the right decision. You're on the right path. Like, here's your reward. And so, I did that, and I had another listing before I left Sacramento. And then we moved up to Central Oregon back in July. And so now I'm just starting over complete. So it's like, I never really considered. Right. I never really would have considered myself an expert. It's like novice to like mid-level, novice to mid-level, novice to mid-level, so I'm back at like novice again because I'm having to rebuild, my entire business, but I'm doing so with all of the knowledge that I've already gained. So I think that's really helpful. And additionally, like my Instagram bio is realtor and money coach, helping people master their money and build generational wealth through real estate. But I also help focus with realtors and financial peace in their businesses, because we know that the career of real estate is a financial roller coaster. It's like, I just got this big commission check, YOLO. And then it's like, I haven't had a deal in 2 months. I can't pay my bills, so it's just this like up and down, up and down. And I had kind of been on a really long journey myself of just personal finances and paying off debt and like all of those things. I was kind of in this debt cycle for years and years and years. And I finally found a tool that worked for me. It's called You Need a Budget. And it's a great software that is just like changed my entire life. And I found that in 2016. And that's kind of when I began like my officially like all consumer and personal loan, like debt-free era was like 2016 on. And I was able to like have so much peace in my finances and see what every dollar was doing and just know like, okay, this money's for this money's for this. And I was able to leave corporate America, make every job I took, I was making less and less money. So I was making probably like 80,000 a year in corporate America
Mhm.
when I left. And then I went down to probably like 40 or 50,000. And then I went down to like 30,000. I was
Mhm.
living in Santa Monica, which is like
Oh,
my
expensive.
rent for a 2 bedroom in Santa Monica was $2,600. So that was like as much as my mortgage was on like a new build, in Sacramento from
Yes.
like, so it's not cheap, obviously, to live in a beach town in Southern
Yes.
California. But I was able to continue doing that and maintain a standard of living,
Wow.
making less money
Mhm.
because I had these principles in place, because I had this tool that I was using.
Mhm.
And it really helped me build this runway to when I decided to start real estate, I had a 6 month runway. Like I could see should my finances stay the same
Mhm.
or even change a little bit, I would be okay for 3 to 6 months if I didn't close a deal. Right. And so that's like, that it gave me more confidence in starting real estate because they say like a lot of us quit within the first like 6 months to a year, because
Absolutely.
if you are doing this as your only option, like as your only career, like you don't have any safety net, you're either building piles of debt or you're like, okay, forget it, I'm failing, I'm not good at this. You're not giving
Right.
yourself time to like succeed, and it takes time to like build this business if you're not as fortunate as I was to find a team that's just like, here you go.
And there's like
um
all these investments up front too of like, okay, you
Totally.
have to pay for the realtor association, all those fees. You have to
Right.
pay the brokerage fees. You have to, all these fees up front. And then when you work with your buyer or seller, you're investing your own money, which a lot of buyers and sellers don't
Right.
know, right? Your own
Right.
money, and then hoping you get it back in commission.
Right.
But yeah, it is a game, right? Of trying to figure out how can I have peace with my money, which is a huge reason of why I brought you on every single episode. As you guys know, we always have you guys share your secret sauce and how we can level up our businesses together. So Bre is going to unpack today a little bit about that secret sauce about financial peace for realtors.
Absolutely. Yeah, the biggest thing is tracking your spending, and this is the hardest
Mm,
part for people, especially getting started. So I have one-on-one coaching that I do, and I have group coaching that I do, but essentially like the components are the same.
mhm.
The time spent together and the accountability is different, right? But
Yes.
I have everyone do the same thing. Like we start by determining what your values are, what's important to you, because we want
Mhm.
to make sure we have that compass going forward. So every transaction, every decision you make with your money, like, does this align with my goals? Does this align with my values?
Ooh,
Is this what I say is important to me? Is that how I'm spending my money
right.
in the highest, use of the good of myself, right?
Mhm.
And so we determine values and goals, and then we go into the hardest part, which is facing your finances. So I have everybody look at their last 3 months of their spending and categorize every single transaction, and also check in from an
Okay.
objective place. Like I always am like, no judges up front, right? Like it's in
Yes.
the past, you did it, like you're making the conscious decision to move forward and do better. So like,
Right.
let's just, no judging, it's just observation. This is just data. It's just numbers. So
Good job.
as they're kind of like going through and categorizing their transactions, what they're doing is like realizing, one, like how much they're spending in each of these categories.
Mhm.
Two, I'm asking them to check in with like, is this in alignment or is this not in alignment with what I say is important to me? So going forward, I can like be aware of that. And then three, it's helping to build those averages. For the hardest thing, I think people, when they set up a budget, I think the hardest thing for people is trying to figure out how much money they need to put in each category. Like, how much do I actually spend on groceries? How much do I actually spend on gas? How much, so you can take that 3 month average and have that foundation and like move forward. Okay, great. Now I
Right.
know what I'm spending. And then it also allows, from a real estate perspective, accounting for all of the business. If you don't already have a business account that you're separating like all of your
You need
like
to.
business expenses, you need to, just
Yes.
for the sake of like knowing profit and loss, like how much are you actually making in your business, right? Because like
Right.
that's an important number, like not just how much is coming in, but like what's your net, what are you actually making,
Mhm.
what are you paying for that's not necessary, what do you maybe need to shift your money to.
Right.
So those are those things where when you build the awareness around what's happening, you can kind of start to like move those dials and tune it in. But from there, then we kind of build that budget, and then we like monitor it for a few weeks and get them kind of self-sufficient
Okay.
in moving forward and being able to, because I don't want them to be dependent on me forever, right? Like I want them to
Right.
be able to
Right.
like take this knowledge and feel confident in the system that they're using, and not just like get frustrated when something is like
Mhm.
off and then they like throw it away, all the work that they did, you know?
Right.
So those are kind of the things we do when we work together. But the biggest piece for people with variable income
Mhm.
is that they're not, if they don't have any idea of what they're spending on a monthly basis, when that money comes in, they have no idea how long they need it for. They have no idea like
True.
how much runway they have.
Mhm.
So they're constantly like chasing, chasing, chasing. And then what that turns into is you're chasing instead of attracting. You're also taking clients that you maybe don't really want to work with, but you think you like
Yes.
have to work with.
Yes.
And nobody wants to work with those clients. You know, it's like the
Compromise
people
your
where
own
you're just like,
values. Nobody wants that.
exactly. Like in your gut, you're just like, I don't
Yes.
want to work with this person, but I need to pay my bills, you know? So it's like, if you have, you know, and I am the group that I'm working with right now, you know, we just kind of got to this place where it's like, okay, when I have a commission check come in, like, what do you do? Okay, well, first of all, I take 25% at least and put it towards taxes. I set it aside for taxes because
Oh,
nobody
so
thinks
good.
about paying their taxes until it's time
So
to
good.
pay taxes. And they're like, I have no money for that. Then
That's
I do
amazing
at
too.
least a minimum of 10% back into my business, right? Because,
Mhm.
you know, you're going to need to pay for mini chat and flow desk and like all of and your
Yes.
association fees and like all the things. Um, I put money in towards savings, at least 10%, and then the rest of it is kind of like pay yourself.
Mhm.
Um, so then I always try to take care of needs and any, you know, any debt requirements, like minimum debt payments, needs, and any financial goals
Mhm.
for 3 months out before I say I have
Ooh,
money to spend on wants. Right. And so
that's good.
that's kind of, and it's like you build into your budget what's important to you. So we're
Mhm.
kind of, some of those wants are already built into your budget. So you're taking like
Right.
your monthly basic expenses before you're funding vacations and, you know,
Mhm.
new extravagant purchases and anything that's not like a planned purchase.
Right.
I give myself that 3 month runway. So it's like if I get a
Mhm.
check coming in and it's only a couple months, then guess what? Like until the next one comes in, like we're still focusing on funding those expenses.
Mhm.
And that I think, you know, one, having eyes on that all the time, and two,
Right.
having that runway provides so much peace in your finances, but
Mhm.
also it allows you to build and show up in your business very differently because
Awesome.
it's not a reaction and it's not
Right.
that chasing. It's like,
Right.
okay, like I'm good for 3 months. Like, yes, I want to get another deal in here. I want to be working. I want to be
Right.
successful in this, but like,
Mhm.
I don't have to take that like $100,000 mobile home listing that like I know is going to be a disaster and take like six, you know, it's just going to drain all of my resources and my
Yes.
time and be very hard to, you know, it's like those kinds of things where it's like, you're not just like, gimme, 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 because
Right.
you're just like, okay, like I got it. We're good for a few months. Like,
Right.
I don't need this one. Like, we can evaluate the next one,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. So it sounds
Yeah.
like the way that you set them up is they reflect on their values, right? And then they look
Mhm.
at their budget and they say, like, okay, does this, the way that I'm spending my money, does it align with my values? And if it doesn't, I need to make some adjustments. So what are your recommendations to clients if like their allocation of spending is not aligning with their values?
So, you know, I ask them basically when we set those values, it's like
Mhm.
looking at the priorities, right? So if you're start to, you know, go through and categorize your transactions and you end up, you're like, okay, between I'm spending $1,000 a month on groceries and I'm
Mhm.
spending $1,000 a month on dining out,
Mm.
those groceries are dying in your fridge, right?
Yeah.
So a really big tip that helps, I think, is just this is kind of one of the ways I in like the set yourself up for success portion is like the before the month starts, because it's not just on autopilot. You don't just like set
Right.
your amounts and then like forget it, right? Every
Mhm.
single month at the end of the month, you're reconciling your budget. You're making sure everything's good. It
Right.
matches to your bank accounts. Like there's
Mhm.
nothing, like if you were, had a surplus in one area, you can move it to places where you had, you know, insufficient funds, and kind of make sure
Yeah.
everything's on the up and up before you move into the next month, and kind of assess like, okay, maybe I don't need this much in this, but in this category I can kind of shift those things around. But the biggest thing that helps is looking at your calendar for the month
Mm.
while you're doing that and saying, okay, we have these birthday dinners, we have these events, we have,
Right.
this travel planned. So like, I need more money in my gas budget. I'm going to need money in my gifts budget. I'm going to need more money in dining out, but I can take money for out of groceries because we won't be eating at home as much. So
Yeah.
it's those things of where you're looking at, it's very intentional and very like, okay, here's where I can shift things here to make sense of what's
Right.
going on this month. It's not just the same as last month because that's what I did last month, you
Right.
know?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so powerful because it sounds like it's not just peace in your budget, but it's creating peace in so many areas of your life, right? Because you're not just, okay, now my lifestyle choices with my money is aligning with my values, my life values, but then at the same time, that all those things are creating peace in my business, right? Because we're always talking about leveling up
Right.
our business. If you have
Right.
peace in your business, you're more able to make, like you said, decisions that continue to align with those values, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly, it's just creating a very intentional
Mm.
life, like in your
Mhm.
business and outside of your business. One of the first things, the first week, we cover like the psychology of money, and we talk about the thought
Mm.
model, which is like a life coaching model that basically just talks about how like circumstances are facts, they're black and white, they can be argued in a court of law, but our
Mm.
thoughts around those circumstances
So
create
good.
the feelings, which create the actions, which create the
Mhm.
results. So it's like, how do we create space between that circumstance and that thought to just be
Wow.
like, okay, is this true? Because a circumstance is a fact, right? So you could have $500 in your checking account, and one person can be like, oh my God, I'm broke, I'm not going to make it. And one person can be like, oh my God, I'm so rich, I have $500.
Yes.
Right. So that thought then creates like how you feel
Right.
about that, and then how you respond to that. And so all of that is very driven. When people say your like thoughts create, your results, it's very true, because
Mhm.
all of those things lead to the next thing. So we address that in the first week, and we just talk about, ways to building awareness around that. One is like providing a 24-hour buffer between any unplanned spending
Ooh.
and the actual purchase. So like, if you're just like, if you are on Instagram and you see an ad, you're like, oh, I need this thing, right?
Is
Like,
that me? Yes.
go ahead and put it in your cart. But like 24 hours later, come back and be like, okay, is this something I need or something I want? Is it something I had planned for in my budget? If
Yes.
not, like, is there, what am I taking away? It's like that opportunity cost, right? What
Mhm.
priority or goal am I taking away from to
Mhm.
purchase this thing? And why do I want it or need it? Is it like a
Ooh.
spending, like, am I buffering a negative emotion? Am I trying to feel
Wow.
good, avoid negative feeling? Am I trying to be more efficient? Like your brain wants to
Mhm.
do these things, your primitive brain, right? It's like
Mhm.
avoid pain, seek pleasure, seek
Right.
efficiency, stay
Right.
alive. Like that's kind of what you're doing. So all of these things that we do to buffer these negative feelings, eating, drinking, spending, social
Mhm.
media, like
Mhm.
these are things that can be very detrimental to your budget and your life if
Yes.
you let them. So that's kind of a lot of the stuff that we work on is the psychology of money. Like also, what do you believe about money?
Mhm.
How do you believe money is made? How
Ooh.
was money talked about in your family growing up? Like all these different things, like what are your value systems around money? Just kind of really diving into all of that, because all of that affects how
Mm.
you move through your everyday life with your finances and your beliefs about money.
Do you feel that because you've talked about your journey a little bit and like going, becoming debt free, and then now you're helping
Mhm.
other people find that financial peace. Talk a little bit about some of the beliefs that you used to believe and now what you believe about money.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely still struggle with some scarcity mindset around money,
Mm.
especially, it's like having relocated and having to rebuild my business. Fortunately, I do have some other things that I do to generate income. So
Mhm.
that helps to kind of pad that a little bit. But, I'm kind of getting to a place where it's like we've had to dip into our savings. And so and I'm like, when is the next deal? I can feel myself like having those feelings of like,
Right.
okay, I need to like do something because I'm like running out of money, which is
Yeah.
like not the case. Right.
Right. Right.
um, but yeah, I think I was, raised very much like it was a chicken little, the sky is falling, like save every penny,
Mhm.
and one of the things that we also talk about is be like the habits of being a good spender, because you can't be a good spender if you're not spending money. So some people think that like saving all of your money is a good
Oh,
practice, but if you're not spending it, you're not making those mistakes and learning and becoming a better spender, right?
wow.
So it's like you have to actually spend money to be a healthy, good
I've never
spender
heard
and
that
have like
before.
a
I love
healthy
that.
relationship with money. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of part of it. But yeah, growing up, it was definitely like I got a bank account at a very early age, like 15, as I got a, part-time job. And I was taught like how to reconcile a bank account and all those things, but like never really how to manage like debt and bills and expenses and all those things. And that
Mhm.
I like joined the rat race really early. Like I started working at 15 and kind of never stopped. And I was working like multiple jobs. But it's like, I don't really have a lot to show for it, So it's like,
Right.
I
Right.
didn't really have a healthy relationship with money. And at one point when I very first started kind of my awareness around spending, I remember I sat down and went through all my expenses and realized this was when I was like 20, probably not until I was like 27 or 28.
Huh?
And I realized I was spending $400 a month more than I was actually making. And that was mostly on like going out and drinking and eating and like,
Ah,
all these things,
we eat
taking
our
like
money.
unplanned trips that like, right, right,
Yes.
taking these unplanned trips and those kinds of things. So it's like,
Mhm.
I've gotten myself out of tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt
Wow.
multiple times and like
Dumb.
just kept getting back
Getting
into
out of
that
it.
debt cycle, because that's another thing that we talk about is emotional adulthood versus emotional childhood.
Yeah.
And emotional adulthood is basically understanding that nothing outside of you is going to give you satisfaction, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not going to affect the way that you feel or are. And like
Mm.
emotional childhood is basically like everything externally is going to make me feel better because everything externally is what's making me feel bad. So it's
Wow.
that emotional adulthood is just realizing like I am the only one that can control how I'm feeling about things. It goes back to the circumstances, thoughts, feelings, all of that. So really like shifting that perspective and shifting the way that you kind of experience those things
Mhm.
changes the way that you interact with everything else outside, right?
Mhm. Brie, are you sure you don't have like a degree in psychology or something?
Well,
I feel like
I
I'm
mean, HR
learning
is
so much.
basically psychology.
I feel like our listeners are getting like so many good insights into like my life and my desires and my psychology.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
great.
I mean, but it's wild. We have so many things that like allow us to check out and not tune in to like what we need. It's
Totally.
like sometimes you just need like a snack and a nap, right? You don't need
Mm.
like a $500 purchase.
Yes, yes. And like I feel like Instagram ads have this way of just kind of like grabbing you and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I worked for that person and there are all these testimonials and like I have to have it." And you're like, "I bought this
Yeah,
47.99 thing." And you're like, "That's it?" Right? Because it has
right.
been like blown up to proportion. So it is really, really zoning in and saying, does it align with my values? And I love that question. So
Right.
Brie,
And like, what am I taking away from, like to get
mhm,
this thing? That's
yeah,
kind of important too.
absolutely. So we're going to close with your best advice for both a novice realtor and an expert realtor. And I know that you've said, I'm not an expert. Really, you're coming to it humbly and you're saying that you've been starting over in different places. And I think that experience has made you an expert, because now you're turning around and you're empowering people with your secret sauce, which is that financial piece, which is that you've been through that journey and you can walk with them through it, whether that's home buyers, home sellers, or realtors, which we desperately need. So what's your advice for your novice realtor or your expert realtor?
So novice realtor, and I love like when people reach out to me and say like I'm thinking about going into real estate, and I'm like, okay, I will be a resource for you. Like I love that. So for novice realtors, I would say have some kind of runway, whether it's like a few months, to be able to financially to be able to kind of give
Mhm.
yourself the opportunity to succeed. And two would be to, figure out what you really, really want from this career before you just like start doing it, and then how
Mhm.
you want to build it from there.
Mhm.
Um, and for a novice or for an expert, I would say, the same thing. Like make sure you keep a runway of like 3 months so you can continue to operate your business from a place of abundance and a place of security instead of a place
Mhm.
of scarcity and fear.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Aubrey, you have just dropped so much value today. Man, I can't wait. Where can my listeners find you? You can mention all your platforms or your websites. And then in those show notes, I want to make sure that I include your link to your coaching. She's got one-on-one coaching. So if you need that financial piece, Bree is your girl. So
Yes.
tell
Yeah.
them where they can find you.
So mostly on Instagram at Bre.Bauer, Bre.Bauer. And then I'll give you the link to my Stan store to include in the show notes, which has all of my coaching and opportunities to work together for finding peace in your finances and your business.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us. And this has been Novice to Expert Stories and Strategies for Real Estate Success. You've been listening to the Novice to Expert podcast. If you're interested in partnering, want to share your own experience as a realtor, or want to sell or buy in DFW, DM me at lauraortega.realtor on Instagram and follow for content that uplifts and empowers you to become a real estate expert.